Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Hold on. Cover me, Tim.
Go.
Okay.
And that's the stream. Thanks, guys.
That was
oh,
interesting.
we had made the most egregious of errors.
Our best stream ever.
Andrew didn't have a hat.
I know. It's terrible. I got so involved in like talking to a programmer about some code he was writing, and I forgot to put on my streaming hat. So yes, hi, welcome. I'm Andrew. This is Tim.
I'm Tim. He's Andrew.
And for the very first time in a long time, the weather in DC is not a swamp.
It
like,
tried
so
yesterday.
Yeah, more tropical storm. We had like. So, like, the news stories worldwide are like, you know, oh, hurricane hits here, but, like, what's not covered is that, like, once they've all come inland, every single one of them is just, like, curved through D.C., and it's just, yeah, it's been...
Nothing's fallen over. The air has just been water for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We're basically
6,
an aquarium.
8. Yeah. Like, if we get a presidential candidate who promises to literally drain the swamp, not metaphorically, not talking about corruption, no, he is going to like take the water and lower the level of it. I am so for that politician. Oh my god, this summer has been
moist.
Yeah. So, and that's why I've had no hat, because it's just like this. It was too hot and sticky all day, every day to wear this hat.
But it keeps the rain off your head.
But like the rain's here. It's just sort of flip. All right.
Anyways,
so, yeah.
About the weather, it's wet. But except today. Today it's not wet.
How's the weather system coming, Tim?
I don't know. We'll have to talk. Didn't you do most of that? How's the weather system coming, Andrew?
I think Dave did most of it. Dave did what is there, and it needs it needs to cycle back and be driven by scenarios.
Weather hot potato.
And be skill relevant.
So the first item on this is always testing, just so that you guys know. Any of you that have joined us for testing, we've been ping-ponging back and forth between 2 builds all week. One of them is new, and one of them is newer. The new build is in good shape. We'll almost certainly be doing a test this weekend. We're working on figuring out what day it is right now. The newer build has, we've banged out a bunch of bugs on that, and we continue to find them. There's a bunch of really cool, really exciting, really nerdy, low-level changes that hopefully you will never see unless you're in our during the day break the build tests.
Yeah, like I broke building plots because I was like, oh yeah, you know, when you place down a plot marker, it's like aligning them to the lowest point of any terrain anywhere inside your plot, and you know, gosh, that should really just align to the terrain right under the plot marker. And then of course, you know, a bunch of plots were like, you know, suddenly high up in the world, and you know, that's the kind of thing of, oops, well, I fixed it, but you know, there was another bug that kind of depended on it. So that's been the kind of thing that we've been squashing. So yeah, there's now on the point capture map, there's a, you know, you see that really cool dragon skull that's just sitting there, and
it has a hat.
You know, yeah, there was like a capture point underneath it, and then now the capture point is sitting on top of it because of that, and there's just like people swarming underneath it trying to get to it, and they can't.
So not listed on the top 10-ish is the like 9 bugs that we've fixed on the newer build. Though we're probably not going to do the newer build on the weekend because we've got one last bug. I think Brian is hopefully testing a fix for that as we speak. But
is that mine, or was there an even newer one?
That one's yours. So,
but to be safe, there's
yeah.
You know, that bug will be fixed, and there'll be another bug after that.
So the TLDR there's a bunch of bugs we've murdered this week that are not listed on here. But part of the reason, a lot of times folks go, why are we testing on this server today and this server tomorrow and this? Well, that's so that we've got a bunch of different build candidates in the air, and we're fixing bugs that all get pushed back to the repository. But we've got one build that's good, and so we can do a weekend test and get you betas in there and smashing faces.
Yeah. So all the servers that are named prep are just, like, obviously, hopefully that's obvious of, like, okay, this is where we are staging, like, the next candidate for that server. So Nuada prep is where the next Nuada is getting checked, and we say, oh crap, there's a bug there, and fix that, and we cycle through that a couple, however long it takes, and then we're like, okay, this one's, this one looks good, kick it forward, and now this is the real Nuada, and we'll continue to, like, make new Nuada preps. Similarly, fledgling and fledgling prep, wormling prep, and all of that. Hatchery is just broken. Like, hatchery prep is like, stuff on, like, individual people's computers.
In terms of throughout the week testing, I know, especially you North America, US guys that have jobs can't always join us for the tests during the day. But some of the fun stuff you've missed out on this week is capture points spawning on the dragon's head, and no combat happening on a plot that was empty.
That was good. Yeah, like, if you're on a building plot with absolutely no building, nobody takes melee damage.
Yeah. If you left a scenario, you ended up naked. That one was fun. So you guys are missing out on all of that. You EU guys, if you get the chance to hop into the during the week tests, there's lots of fun and exciting always happening.
I feel like we need to, once the stream barrier gets lifted, we need to just have, like, someone who's really, really great at making silly mouth noises to be, like, live streaming the tests of brand new builds and just, be
That's
like,
boing,
bonk.
Start part of our new interview process.
Yeah.
How good of a Foley guy are you? Mouth Foley?
Yeah. Beatbox?
Maybe.
Like Bobby McFerrin, but hateful, basically.
Bitter. So,
maybe
number one...
Maybe he is bitter and hateful now. I've not, like, heard of him since, like, his 15 minutes of fame back in the 90s.
Yeah. So, lots of testing this week, lots of fun and silly bugs. We've murdered a whole crap ton of them. There will be a test almost certainly this weekend. And with the update email when it goes out, we'll let you know when. But right now, tentatively, probably tomorrow, noon to 3 Eastern time.
Right, so, top 10 things besides, like, testing and bug fixing. My number one thing this week has been working on the big building rubble chunks that, are so incredibly important to, just Gothmog versus large projectiles is my go-to YouTube video for inspiration. It's just, the Siege of Bellinor Fields and just big chunks of the White City of Gondor getting knocked off and falling on people. So right now, when there's, like, a section of a building that becomes disconnected from the rest of the building, it disappears. On my computer, no, there's a physics object that now comes through the world, and I've been doing work on getting the collisions just right, and it's not in a state that you can see it yet. I was really, really hoping it would be by this weekend. Like, that's why we've been... It came kind of down to the wire. I was sad. I wanted that. So that's part of the chaos of the build, was I was just, like, holding it there and being like, how can we get this in? I want to see it in, and... Oh, is this
Totalvic sent this to us.
Oh, we got
Can
drink
holders.
koozies.
Yeah, koozies, exactly.
Cozies. Cool. I mean, that literally, it's keeping my drink cool.
So first, round one of that when it lands.
You know what's the best thing about this is that, like, I could just have a can of malt liquor now and no one would know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the... You guys have no idea what I'm drinking.
Oh.
So round one of that, once the backers get that, we're probably not going to see damage from it. It's probably just going to have collision. Maybe shove some folks around. What do you think that's going to look like version 1 once we throw it at them?
You know, that's one of those things of it depends on how it lines up with the week. You know, obviously, very, very first thing that goes into Hatchery is going to just, you know, you will see it on the client at all. I could put something in there now where it just like, you know, you see it fall off the building and, you know, fall through the terrain or something like that. But once it's, you know, I'm probably not going to try and push that in until its collisions are all doing the right thing.
Well, yeah, but like we're not going to have, probably version 1 is like, we're not going to have getting smushed and damage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's a thing we're going to work towards, but it's not going to be in version 1, just setting expectations and all that jazz.
There'll be a version 2.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and a version 3.
None of which will be 1.0, but
yeah.
You know, I think the biggest part is going to be getting, like, okay, you know, you damage the building in a way that makes this part come off. Don't just have it fall, but give it an interesting velocity as it flies off, depending on, you know, who damaged it, how hard.
Or like it did before, where it hits the ground and rockets into space. Number 3, coherent. So we've got everything hooked up and using the new API at this point, and we're working through in-house testing and debugging before moving on to more testing. So Matt and JB have sort of been tag teaming this. Matt hitting the back end and sending all the data through to Coherent, and JB hitting the front end, reading that data in and retooling the interfaces to use the new data with some help from a bunch of mod squatters to you know, re-hook up everything to the new front end and back end. So that's going along really, really quickly. It's doing well, and we're excited to have that almost put to bed. Which I'm sure once we get to the Q&A section, folks will inevitably ask about 64-bit things. Getting into Coherent is the first step of that, and then hopefully we'll roll into 64-bit quickly after that.
Yeah, actually there's some question of whether we will ever even, you know, deploy the Coherent stuff independently of 64-bit, or if it'll just be, here is the 64-bit and Coherent client.
Right.
That may be what happens.
For the tech curious people about that, the current solution we have, Ceph, you'll notice in Task Manager you've got all the different client processes. Some of those
it looks exactly like you're running a copy of Chrome as our game client.
So a bunch of those have like all the HTML and all the images and all the stuff loaded into memory in them, and since they're on separate processes, the fact that the client is 32-bit isn't constrained by multiple processes, and so all that art and all that HTML is in a different process and not taking up the very limited memory space we have on the main game client.
Hey Tim, you're a nerd.
True facts. As soon as we load Coherent in and start using Coherent for our primary UI, all that HTML and all those images are going to be loaded into the main process, which most of you who have been with us since the push to beta know we're sort of on the threshold of having too much in that, and anyone who's got memory crash knows we sometimes go over that threshold. So this will make that worse until we get up to 64-bit. So there's a little bit of balancing act. If it makes this a lot worse, then we may not show you guys Coherent until we're ready to go 64-bit, because we don't want to have a huge regression and out-of-memory crashes.
I still say it's going to be a really small gap between them.
Yeah.
You know, so much of the code is common to the server, which is already 64-bit, so
yeah,
it's really just the UI thing that doesn't play nice.
Right. Additional stat upgrades. Last week was about optimizations and networking. This week, Christina added new features. She made stats more designer-driven, hooking them up to our ECTs and getting them ready to be integrated with the skills upgrade that Rob and Caleb are working on. Christina also fixed the haste stacking issues, which the backers had dubbed the Blender of Death. Again, fun stuff that you may have missed out on this week. There was no limit to how many times you could stack haste, and so you got into a state where you could just blend things.
And of course, you know, your ability speed drives your animation speed, which, you know, is very, very kinetic. I kind of want to make the Blender of Death game.
Yeah.
Like, you know, possibly with, like, you know, rocket-powered rhinoceroses and just, you know, just completely out there.
Yeah.
It would, you know, if Getting Over It were, you know,
an MMO.
yeah, a Twitch game.
It did quite well on Twitch.
You know what I mean. I just, for those of you who have seen Getting Over It, like, I really, really, really want to just have MJ plays Getting Over It on stream for the backers. That would be, I'm sure he would not be angry at all by the end of that.
with something like every time you fall down more than like 1 or 2 tiers, he has to take a shot.
Oh. Every time he falls, Sacrix gets to ask him a question. Oh.
Well, you know.
All right. So, another big thing that we've been doing, it's been talked about for several cycles now, is sort of streamlining our ability creation process. So the infrastructure's all there. Caleb is working on, for people who haven't seen the last couple of weeks, you know, we just sat down post beta 1 and said, okay, all right, so we have this many classes, and each of them fully loaded out is going to have roughly this many skill parts that you can mix and match in the ability builder to make abilities. And so it took us an average of this many designer hours to construct each of those skill parts and get them debugged and in the game and everything. And so let's see, this many classes times this many skill parts times this many hours. Oh god, that's not gonna ship. How can we get the number of hours down? Because we really don't want to cut down the number of classes or skills, because that would just be lame. And, you know, and also we looked at the number of hours and it was like, that is clearly the wrong number of hours. That is not how long that should take for someone to do. So, been doing a bunch of work on making that super streamlined, and, you know, I think we're going to see some mage stuff prototyped into that.
Yeah, and you know, when we did, I've heard it mentioned a couple of times, this is not like a rehabilitation to, but when we did rehabilitation, there was, we didn't build great tools for Ben. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
It was a how quick can we get this in, and Ben had to, like, you know, write 1,000 lines of XML to, like, add a skill part. Well, not 1,000,
but a lot. And so the interface that Ben used to construct these things was not great. And so we sort of went in and did the beta 1 classes and learned where the pain points for Ben were. And so now we're actually building the tooling to make him highly effective and highly productive. And out of all of that, we're also sort of getting some new features and some new bells and whistles that were necessary for stuff like the mages and air and ears and all that jazz. So it is not a complete overhaul or refactor or anything like that. It's mostly us building tools, and while we're in there, getting some new features to get the rest of the classes in.
Debuggability is at least as important as you know, how fast it is to write the first time.
You want to take building server?
Yeah, building server. You know, we have a bunch of servers, and, you know, there's like the physics server and the NPC server and the, you know, sort of the gameplay server, which is where, you know, we bring it all together and decide, you know, who moved where and did how much damage to who. And right now, all the stuff about buildings is sitting there inside the gameplay server. And, you know, so like, we did damage to this building. Is it still structurally stable? And we are sort of pulling that out to its own system. So it'll be on a physically separate box, and, you know, we'll sort of asynchronously talk back and forth when building changes happen, so that these like big computationally heavy batch processes do not intersect in any way with the all right, and what happened next, and what happened next, and what happened next, and that super regular cadence of updates coming from the gameplay server. So, that's a thing where, like, it's partitioning it into what are the high latency parts of the game and what are the low latency parts of the game, and make sure all the high latency things are on a separate physical box from the low latency parts.
The end result of that being basically there might be a teensy bit more latency between you hit a building and you see the damage from the building, but if that would have been an expensive operation, right now it could have caused a lag spike on the server.
Right.
Once this in, it would not, and so you can go continue stabbing everybody.
A teeny bit of more latency on seeing buildings change versus a teeny bit of latency on everyone's skills while buildings are changing,
right.
And that's not cool at all.
Yeah. So this means the combat loop, the combat system, the reactiveness, all of that will be much tighter when buildings are involved.
Yeah, there's also there's also nerd time of this is kind of the last bit of places where we're sort of gluing C++ and C# together in a single process, and when we get rid of that, then that lets us take our C# servers and run them on Linux. But that's a little farther down the road.
So we got to go to 2017 in NetCore. Characters 2.0, number 7, Characters 2.0. So this is what we call our ongoing project for updating the characters, a long process with many technical requirements, UV, GO, proportion, body parts improvements are being worked on. Once we complete the art and the required supporting tech, these changes will go into the game. We won't make this update until that's possible. So there's a whole lot of work sort of happening behind the scenes here. And then we'll get a little bit of tech time onto it. It's mostly in the hands of the artists right now. Once we get some tech time onto it, we'll just sort of have to throw the switch, and we'll go from old characters to new characters.
Everyone's shoulders will be a little better proportion to their hips and those kinds of awesome things.
Yeah, I was talking to Tyler about it out in the hall yesterday, and I may get this wrong, and he can come over and yell at me if I do, but I think the characters were a little bit too tall and too slender where their shoulders were placed or something like that, and so that's getting redistributed a little bit so that the characters are more...
Yeah, I mean, you've seen characters look pretty good when they're running around in the world, but there's a lot of tweaks based on I'm going to look at you from this point of view. Right. Where shoulders are, guys carrying a big claymore and his shoulders look a little hunched together, and those kinds of things are, coming out of having just slightly better proportions.
So, to that, we made further edits to the male human character this week. Everyone agreed the subtle changes to his muscle tone were a big improvement. Male and female human updated meshes. Joe finished weighing the new models to the updated skeleton, weighting the new models to the updated skeleton. The animators are now using the new characters to animate, allowing them to find subtle issues to be fixed. Overall, the animators are happy with the new models, rig, and weighting. These improvements speed up the animation process. And in case none of you guys were watching the morning stream this morning, we briefly talked about how the morning meetings we have with management, and Tyler always comes over and was like, the animators did the left sword, right axe, left axe, right sword, and goes down this just shopping list of the different weapon combinations and your how your character holds them and stands while he's doing them, and so speeding that process up means we can iterate through all of those much faster, which is really good. Human male and female materials. John completed the baking and material export of the nude and underwear meshes. Viking medium armor update. John completed the high poly fit to the character 2.0 and is now updating a new low poly version that adheres to the new improvements. We'll use this visually complex armor for testing artist-created LODs for characters versus our current procedural method. This was a chat that Tyler and Dave had a few days ago that was basically right now the artists make a single model and mesh for all of that, and then in code we LOD them down to smaller poly counts so that you don't need hugely complex characters that you're looking at 2 kilometers away. And we do all that procedurally, and Dave was doing some math and figuring it out, and determined that it would give us some performance gains if the artists did it themselves. And that would also give them more control over how these guys look, and so we're going to start going down that path and getting better LODs that are more performant.
So, next thing, Ben's doing a bunch of class design, some of the farther out things. He's also sort of taking a look at all the mage classes and is doing that kind of hand in hand with the tooling improvements so that we can say, okay, what is our shortest path to chucking some fireballs? I like chucking fireballs. Do you like chucking fireballs?
I love chucking fireballs.
That's my favorite thing.
You guys should actually watch him. Max streams his fireball chucking league every Saturday.
Oh, really?
Sunday, actually.
Oh, right.
The League of Chucked Fireballs. Yeah, no, my wife is the fireball chucker. She's like, I'm not allowed to play like ranged DPS. She's just like, honey, go tank for me. I'm going to sit back here and set things on fire.
Go get punched so I can incinerate.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Number 9, Animation 2.0, updated style and timing support. Updated style and timing. Oh, right. Tyler talked about that a little bit this morning too, about how we're working on. Right now, our when we slow down or speed up an animation, the whole animation gets slowed down or sped up the same amount. And so, if you do a sort of heavy, slow, laborious attack, it actually kind of looks like your dude's in like a time bubble. And so Tyler's been working on figuring out timing where the playback rate, the rate that the animation plays, changes throughout the animation so that you get bursts of speed punctuated against bursts of not speed.
Yeah, so it's instead of, so you have an animate.
Do you want to come sit down?
No, you mostly got it right.
So, you got this animation, and by default, it's like that. And so we want to, speed it up, or slow it down. We don't want to make it like that. We want to be like.
So you sort of pull it back, and it's got some weight to it.
So you feel like it's got more, like do more of the time stretching on the backswing, and still get like a good hard crack to Tim's head.
And so that lets us
watch this morning's stream if you want to see us pantomime it.
So that lets us get like.
Did y'all hear that? Tyler does a much better impersonation of this than me on this morning's Morning with Max.
So another callback to Morning with Max.
Oh yeah.
And so, anyways, the.
Did you know that you were going to be a YouTube video star when you came here and begged us for a job, Max? Was that your goal all along?
Leaving your verb choice aside, I did not, but it is fun, and I've gotten used to being on camera.
Okay, he bribed us for a job. Let's just tell the truth. He bribed us for a job.
Bribed you with fruit.
Yeah. All it takes to get in the door is a bowl of fruit. And so the end goal of that being, the artists, the animators can make a single animation for like an attack, and that attack, there's ranges that I think Tyler's been working on. We want it to go from like 1 second to 4 seconds or something like that, but we've stretched some of these animations out from like 1 second to like 10 seconds, and they still look pretty good. Yes. So
Scott did a short sword.
Just quit yelling from off camera. You want to say something? Come say it.
You're either here or you're not. Come on.
In or out, Tyler.
I've just really enjoyed this part of the work.
And so
yeah, I mean, Scott did this wasn't just me. This was Scott doing a lot of the actual prototyping and figuring out, and this is not why I came over here. And we took the initial prototype, taking all these ideas, adding in kind of like these fillers, took it from like, I think it was 0.4 seconds for a really quick hit, where we basically just take everything out. all the way up to almost 8 seconds. And at 8 seconds, it kind of started feeling a little wonky for like a sword stab. I think we picked something that could be the quickest. So it's 0.4 seconds to 6 seconds, which is a great range. There's plenty that you can do there. The good thing here is that
20 to 1.
Yeah, the good thing here is that we can just give this to design. If ever anything needs to change, they can just tweak some values. That's the proposed system. The idea is previously, if like we wanted to change the timing of everything, that the base animations would have to change. The idea here is that if there's a system of curves and weights of these different segments of the animation, we can just kind of say, oh, the whole thing needs to be slower or faster without animators really having to do anything.
Yeah. And so that allows us, A, to use some of these animations for a couple of different attacks, but also just, the crazy amount of interactions that we've talked about with the game. Your character could be slowed and frozen and webbed and encumbered and have all these different debuffs on you, and the attack would still look good. It would not look like you're in like a speed bubble.
Yeah, and part of the issue with the old the old version that Ben had wanted to get away from as well was just not knowing when you were going to swing. That was kind of one of my own personal frustrations, because when we would loop, you'd come back and you'd loop, and you're when am I going to swing? And you'd have to kind of figure out like your abilities plus the other abilities of your opponent. And what I wanted to try and retain was like, when I push a button, it looks like I'm going to attack. It doesn't mean I'm going to attack that very moment, but there's always a, I'm going to bring, I have to prepare and then do something.
My number one thing is like the instant that like your finger hits that button, that stuff needs to start happening.
Yeah. So right now, like the longest version would be like your character's standing there, takes his weapon, gives it a spin as he's rolling into, leaning back. Melee's the best example because it's really fast. Spins the weapon, leans back, and then moves forward, might hang a little bit longer here, might hang a little bit more on his recover, but that's all just to give us a little bit of time, so then you get back to idle, you very clearly know the character is ready to attack again, you can kind of get an actual visual timing of how everything's supposed to go. And this it's probably one of the funnest and semi-anxiety inducing things I've been working on, because we actually have to get all the tech in to make all this work. So there's a plan in place.
There's tech dependencies, and
the animators are moving forward.
Still the keeper of most of the animation code. I have not found a victim to pawn that off on yet.
Yeah. So what we'll probably need is, once Andrew comes free, is we'll get him. I have tasks ready. For you to look at, and part of the variable timing system is probably going to be a bigger deal. I don't know, so we'll see where.
Big deal.
Yeah, I don't know where that's going to sit in actually hooking it up. And Scott was talking to me this morning about how the hatch sheet would work, where we enter all the data. And I was like, engineers are going to tell us.
And on that note, if you're an engineer that knows animations and you're looking for a job and this sounds like an exciting problem, send us your resume.
Yeah, and we're going to have plenty of other animation to do.
But it's also been cool. Like, we've talked about a lot.
Beech trees.
Yeah.
How that relates to the gameplay, so that as a player, you can have a reasonable expectation of when the attack is going to hit you, and you're going to take damage, even in its slowed down or sped up state.
Yeah,
like,
it's all about telegraphing.
Yeah. I mean, even in we talked about that with magic casting as well. I mean, basically, one of the things Rob wanted me to do was to go through all of Ben's mage abilities and just determine, like, does it all still work? Can you figure out the animation? Can you figure out the events?
At the same time, we're still not making a Twitch game.
Right.
Oh, right.
Can you hit the dodge button at exactly the right second is not in the cards, but it just feels viscerally better to see that connection.
One of the things we talked about, all of this actually kind of just works well. Like, one of the things that Ben wanted was that you kind of knew what was going to happen, so that you weren't always sitting here ready to cast your fireball and you didn't really know when that was going to occur. So it's kind of more broken up into phases is the goal, where like you might go into a loop. Let's say you've got a really long ability, and like it's 5 guys have to do some big siege spell. You might start out here, then start here to here, and people kind of can see like what phase are you actually in before you're they can go, oh, it's about to happen, go fuck those guys up, and then you'd lean back and actually cast your spell. So you actually have all these little identifiers of kind of a timeline.
But that's also sort of relevant to the timetable that we're on now and the features that we're working on now. Those of you who remember when we had mages in the game and you could throw the fireball and hit the water ball and make the steam cloud, like, if you see a mage casting a spell and you have a reasonable expectation of when he's going to fire off his fireball, then you could time your water ball conceptually so that it impacted and cool things happen. So that doesn't require that you to be ultra twitchy. It doesn't require this to be an action, like, you know, adrenaline-fueled game, but being able to read that skill and rewarding players who read it well, I think contributes to some cool gameplay.
And just to make sure expectations are set for at least the few people who are paying attention to this stream, the first iteration of some of the mage abilities will be a bunch of shared animations that are going to be more simplified, just to get us into a prototyping phase so that we can see people actually, you know, doing their abilities.
Talking about prototyping, Scott's completed some prototypes that should save us significant time on Deflect, same as the prototyping we did for Flinches last week.
Yeah, that
So who are flinches in the test for this weekend?
flinches in
no?
the test.
No, well,
Not
I
yet.
mean,
Okay.
the same Flinch that we've had for
Sure.
ages. The new stuff is not in.
Okay.
Oh yeah, this is all related. We need blending for this.
It just sucks.
So specifically, I don't know if you remember when Scott and I were doing some tests. This is where we hit the bug where like one guy would crash if the other guy flinched. So there's a bug around that, and then we need to be able to overlap the flinch frames. Remember that part?
Right.
So I can't put it in yet, but what this is just instead of using actual animation, just blending the poses.
As soon as I see a chunk of building wall crush a lucre pan, I'll be all about this.
Yeah, I know.
Tyler,
But
talk to us
that's
about
the explanation there is instead of the animators were previously doing things like, you know, okay, spend 2 or 3 hours going, right, and we'd get the frame counts and everything correct. So now all we have to do is we get this blending, which is in there. It just doesn't quite work the way we want it to. So that all they have to do is go like this, like this, like this, and we can actually get a few flinches in instead. And so all they have to do is pose these
That
things.
needs to be a GIF.
This is going to be a GIF, I know. That's what I'm doing. So we get like, right now we have one flinch, right? Because it only takes like 15 minutes, just pose a character into a flinch position. What we'll do is we'll then just procedurally blend in and out. Scott had some good notes for just some improvements for Andrew that's in those tasks. And then we tried it with Deflect as well, which we didn't think would work, and that worked as well too. So that shaves off like 2 to 3 hours per thing we have to do. So that's good.
Talk about beech trees now.
Beech trees. So Dion's been working on beech trees. Anybody who's been paying attention, she's been on that for, this will be like the second week. And we went from like figuring out how to make them, and that's always a struggle where you're like, how do you make this specific tree? That's a beech tree.
That's a beech tree.
So beech trees are like this predominant tree that's in both Europe and in the Americas, and they come in like all different kinds of wacky shapes and sizes. Like they were kind of a great choice to just work on because they look different than the trees we had, but because they come in so many shapes and sizes, I'm having her make like 2 different styles of them. And she's working through iterations of though. I think she's done 4. She's on 5 now, and now it'll just be quick. Finish those up next week and then move on to the next creative environment thing.
Yep. So last one, and this is actually 10 if we don't count testing as one of our top 10. So I think that's fair. Is the crafting UI is coming together as a real thing, not as a bunch of, you know, GeoCities style placeholders that a server engineer dropped in there just to be like, yeah, this button sends this server command. What do you want? So now it's turning sexy. There's layouts for the recipe book. Michelle's been doing just visual variations for it, and you know, also putting documentation into it to make it explanatory of what is going on. Because let's be honest, you open the MJ's like, what do you mean crafting sucks? Did you not read this 50-page PDF on how to use crafting?
Well,
and, that is totally fair for like the placeholder UI, but you know,
I think you're thinking of in-game documentation. Yeah. This is just like for the designers and how the actual design of the thing works, I believe.
Yeah, but it's going to be foundational.
Sure.
It's going to.
Sure.
We're going to expose some of it.
Ku's got it up over on his screen over there, and it's one of the comments I put in the update is it's been fun to watch it go from like a wireframe literally from like a ballpoint pen to a really quick drawing, and then turned into something that looks like a functional piece. And the fun part is one half is like the start button, the ingredients, everything that you'd put in to actually build out something. The other one's the recipe book, and that's being treated as literally, I just think of it like a little theme park of fun for the artists, because we can basically treat it like these little independent web pages. As I understand it, I'm sure JB's over there crossing himself and getting upset, but it's really great because you can just do whatever you want. And so like some of the theories were like, oh, you pull up a recipe that had my theory at least was you pull up a recipe that had something from the depths, and you could have like tentacles wave across the screen, and then your recipe comes up. You know, it's not just blank pages. We can do all different kinds of fun stuff with it, and that's the kind of stuff that, you know, I know that JB loves doing. So makes sense.
Yeah, I know what kind of webpage Tyler's going to look at in there.
It's research, Andrew.
It's research. Okay, I guess I'll hang out.
Yeah, you got to hang now. They're going to ask you art questions. So we got 19 minutes left. We'll be taking art questions only. Tim and I are going to drink a beer.
Was it good for you guys?
Yeah.
All right. The first one is Curly asks, is the jobs site up to date, specifically for the programmer, junior, mid, and senior positions?
Yes. I mean, those things are fairly open-ended. You know, we very much do not like dive super deep down into, oh, you know, you need exactly this skill, you need exactly 2.7 years of experience using this exact piece of middleware with this version, you know. So those are flexible, those are open-ended by design. You know,
we do have some positions that are not on the site. So if you're in game dev or art or tech, send us a resume and we'll look at it.
Yeah, if you're awesome, we'll talk about finding a place for you, especially if that place is Virginia. Still hard to recruit people here.
To Shut Kid Up asks, in regards to, I love that name. To Shut Kid Up asks, in regards to damage and LOS, other MMOs have had issues with water and using the top of water like an imaginary wall, allowing someone to swim and anyone above water unable to attack or vice versa. How will this be handled in CU?
For the most part, just physics queries of, you know, like, we're biasing really heavily towards just attacks having a physical reality in the world of this, you know. You shoot an arrow, that is a collidable object moving through the world, and what it hits, that kind of thing. So
there's definitely some tuning that we have to do there, where like right now, if our projectile hits anything that has collision, or even some things that don't have collision, it treats it as a collision. So there's some tuning where maybe we'll have to tell them to ignore the water collider and stuff like that. But in general, we're trying to go fairly realistic on that.
Yomi GW asks, I noticed an interesting bit of behavior while in the beta the other day, and this made me wonder about something. When your character runs up a hill that is too steep to climb, is the intent to have the character simply run in place when they reach a certain point or incline, like with most MMOs, to have them slide back down the hill, akin to Super Mario, or something else?
So, I can start the answer to that, though Andrew might have a couple of notes, and I see Rob walking by because it's going to be based on what Rob has told me.
Yeah, Rob doesn't want to be on stream.
No, what I was going to say is like the movement and going up hills needs some tuning. The physics, the angle of incline, the speed that you're going, all of that needs some tuning. I think there's also some question about the validity of the height map that the character's running on. I'm not entirely sure, but that needs some work right now. That's one of those things.
Speak up a little.
That's one of those things that we'll have to get to. Is just the gist of that was we need to tune that more. Probably the goal is going to be like I mean, it'd be really great to do like an exerted animation, you know, like a lean forward exerted animation, and just I think we can do that because we probably have an uphill state.
I mean, the way we've done the physics is definitely going to end up towards, and you just stop moving, not so much, you know, you can overshoot your ability and then you slide down is not really how the physics on that work. But, you know, having a better animation than, and now you run in place is, I think that is a good goal.
Yeah, I think one of the things we had talked, now that I think about it, that could go on your list. We need right now, like just, you know, when you're walking up against something, you just stop. You don't continue animating. Would be a good one.
So anyways, that's the thing we're iterating on, and it has more iterations to go.
I mean, a lot of that ends up being like what feels good.
Yeah. So give us feedback if you don't like the sliding, if you do like the sliding. Once we start iterating on it, bring those concerns up again.
Adra Cortesia asks, will we get some kind of roadmap in the near future for the rest of Beta 1?
Yes. I do not have a roadmap for the roadmap, but there is an internal queue. It really has just been okay. What were the pain points? Clean up the infrastructure to make sure that doing more of those things is more efficient going forward, and we'll be back into fairly major production soon. The biggest thing we want for kind of next phase of beta is having the full building loop in place as much as we can, and that's going to be all the tech about rubble and destruction and the building server, and probably a little bit more on siege engines.
And then we make making abilities faster, we make making characters faster, we make making races a thing. Yeah, so there's a whole step back that we're just kind of making things better.
Jack Mode asks, animation canceling is a huge and controversial part of combat in ESO. How will you prevent animation canceling in CU?
In a lot of games, your animations drive your gameplay. My animation takes this long, and so I get stuck in my attack for however long that animation is, and if I can figure out a way to get out of the animation, I can get out of the cooldown of the ability. We've taken the opposite approach, which is your abilities drive your animations, and so figuring out a way to get out of the animation doesn't end the ability, it doesn't terminate the execution time of the ability. And if there is a mechanic like that, which I don't think there is any plan for, but if there is a mechanic like that, it will be intentional.
So, Max, could I see your Odolvik drink koozie over here?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, one of the most important things about our game is the server is in charge of just about everything, and the server does not actually know about animations at all. Like, from the server, it's, this is basically, these are players. Just bonk, 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 bonk. And it doesn't know, and the server is telling the client that, hey, this guy is using this skill, and the client says, I should play, this guy's moving this way and using this skill, and like all that kind of server metadata type things. It's like, the best way to describe the game server is, if you've played like D&D, Warhammer, tabletop gaming like that, just imagine that running, with each turn is 1/30th of a second, 33 milliseconds. And so, it's all that just very abstract. I run around, I bounce off of this, it's not. And the client is just like, well, if he's doing this, I should probably play this animation. And that's why, like, we've had, the things about, making animations that scale their time, because, it's not, the animation isn't driving it. The server's saying, hey, you're starting this now, and the hit's probably going to happen at this time. And the client's like, well, taking into account, when I got that packet and what the lag is and all, I just need to come up with some kind of animation to fit what the server told me. So go out and grab this animation and stretch it or whatever. But it's all very, very design first.
Daladin asks, mobile. Chat and trading are likely easy, but how about crafting and cube on mobile?
So, crafting... just about the entire crafting UI is based around, web pages, same as everything else. So that is a thing that can happen. I'm not kidding when I say, like, you use the crafting UI. Like, your client's UI is just making totally standard web API calls up to the server. That snaps out. Some of the web pages for the crafting UI are going to need some redesign just to be more mobile friendly. Or, it's possible there will be a community app, but capability-wise, it's, it's there. There are going to be some crafting things where we say you actually have to log into the game to, actually go gather these materials or things like that. But that's there. Cube Mobile. Yeah, I'm not touching that one.
Yeah, in terms of Camelot Unchained as a game, not Cube as a standalone building app, we'll probably expose some stuff like permissions for your buildings and your guild's buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah, if someone's like, hey, can you give me permission on your plot, that is the thing that should be mobile.
Yeah, you know, the Vikings are raiding your keep and you want to add another guild to your keep's permissions so that they can upgrade it or whatever. We'll probably get around to adding some of that functionality to the mobile app, but in terms of like, I want to place a wall here, not right now.
Yeah, that's there's just a whole bunch of things of porting the game from DirectX to Vulkan or Metal so it runs on mobile phones at all, and then designing a good UI for editing buildings that works with touch as opposed to mouse and keyboard. Those are both big problems that do not get CU launched sooner, and we want to launch CU sooner. Where it's easy to do, where like there's a thing where we can build CU in a way that this is also accessible from a web page or from mobile. We absolutely do, but we don't want to stretch it out for that.
Brando2 asks, is Characters 2.0 considering only art and tech for current classes in Beta 1, or is the release subject to classes upcoming in Beta 2 or 3?
Everything that we're doing is going to affect the way we do the characters.
It's cross-class. Naked person is naked person.
Yeah, I mean, it one of the things I keep saying is that it's, whether I have a hand, a glove, or a machete, or a chainsaw for a hand, it's all still technically just a piece of the character. So all of that stuff just is going to be not only doing better art, just better looking art, but making it easier for the animators to work, making it easier for making it more performant, just doing a better overall job. All of that it becomes the new de facto way we do the characters.
Have you guys already built mage animations, or are those?
We have old mage animations that we did before Beta 1 they're not really mage animations specifically. They were more like
casting.
Well, no, they were like direct self. They were a very generic set of things. So we're going to take a version of that for at least the mage stuff, and just I talked with Ben about a couple of different shapes so that the characters will have I think it was like 5 or 6 different animations, and then we'll do them so that they work with focuses and wands, and those few animations will be the grounds of making more robust animations at a later point.
But those animations will be built against Characters 2.0.
Sorry?
Those animations would be built against Characters 2.0.
Correct, yeah. So one of the things where another point of anxiety is the fact that we've got new animations that are going to need new skeletal support. The new characters are going to be updated on the existing animations. Some of those existing animations will also get a style update, as well as the variable timing update. So there's kind of like just this is the way we're doing things, and we're just rolling through it and writing down how we're doing things. And that's, like I said, that'll affect everybody.
Helzek asks, are there any notable differences in the code between the realms? Not necessarily any specific example of a code difference, but maybe who's got some extra lines over the others, or who had some magic happen to get their class mechanics to work. Also, 5-minute warning.
So we're trying to have as much of the differences between realms just driven entirely by data. Just load in a spreadsheet of items, load in, and the differences between the realms will be expressed entirely by the stats in the spreadsheet, or load in little scripts for how each skill works. So we're trying really hard.
I will say, in terms of reusable skill nodes, the stone healers had a couple unique abilities. So it's not specifically for the stone healers, but in terms of stuff we implemented earlier than we might otherwise have implemented it, some of the stone healer features got in earlier to support them in terms of like making the stones come up out of the ground and position swapping and stuff like that. So there was a little bit extra code to support stone healers.
Yeah, I think that'll be, you know,
But that'll just be something we
sort
don't
of like,
write later.
you know, like this skill part hits this, you know, function, and so I think when we come back at the very end, it'll be interesting to go back and say, you know, all right, what are all the parts we expose? How many different things use each of them?
Right.
And, you know, then we'll say, who's the weirdest?
Yep.
Who's the weirdest?
I have a feeling that the Tuatha are going to end up being the weirdest by the end of it.
Yeah, I can see that.
And by that I mean, you know, the Vikings and the Arthurians are going to share the most like code
Abilities.
modules between them and be mixed in different ways, whereas the most like, well, this is a total one-off is going to be some kind of like crazy ass like tree magic that you know, sends vines after you or something.
Sounds about right.
So Strike and Salted Shoe and maybe some others have been asking this question, which might be a nice one to end with. Now that we are nearing the end of 2018, is there anything that you personally are hoping to accomplish by the end of the year?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great
I mean,
answer.
yeah.
Thanks, guys.
I mean, the year could be over.
My goal is to get the character art and character animation nailed down, written down, and you know, some of it is being done to the point that we can go, yep, we've made the right decisions, this is the way to go, and we're just coming to the new year just making lots of stuff.
So there are two things that I just personally really, really want to see. I want to see big building chunks do horrible things to horrible players.
Specifically short ones.
Yes, short ones.
One's too slow to get out of the way.
Yes, with their stubby little legs, they can't get away from the giant rock that is about to fall on them. And secondly, I want to see someone cast a wind field and deflect someone else's fireball into a place that fire chucker never intended it to go. That's my top two.
Did you ever tell people about your little playlist video that you've been showing?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it a few times.
Andrew keeps playing the chucking rocks and stuff from the siege on.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah, there's just this one like 90-second video on YouTube of Gothmog and large projectiles, and that's just that's my inspiration.
Yeah, I've been working towards a lot of server automation stuff, and I'm hoping once Colin gets out from under building server, we can start talking about like service discovery and making it so that the servers can figure out what servers they want to talk to rather than telling them what servers they need to talk to, and automating that and removing a human/file component from a lot of that stuff.
Take the men out of the loop. That always works out well.
All right, shall we close out the stream?
Tim and Colin are both going to have to turn their keys at the same time to, you know.
Oh, yeah. Terminator or bust.
Yep. All right, that was a very robust stream.
Robust stream.
Yeah. All right, well, we will see you later.
See you soon, guys.
Die a
See you
little
later.
inside
Keep
every
an eye
time I
out
say
for
that.
our update
Good.
going out, and our thoughts are with the folks in
Did
Florida.
you guys talk about testing at the beginning? I missed
We
that.
did.
Yes.
But to rehash, there's like 99% chance we'll be doing a test tomorrow. We'll send time out with the update email, but it'll probably be noon to 3 EDT.
Yeah, I've got the
Brian needs to tell us exactly what we're testing, I think.
updates done. Brian was working on the update or the testing email, so that should be done shortly.
All right, see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And muted.
The little bit that dies is just the weak parts.